Welcome back to the Buddhist Psychology Podcast. I'm Lisa Dale Miller. This episode is dedicated to the thousands of precious beings in Los Angeles who have lost their homes, schools, businesses, places of worship, and once beautiful nature parks. Though utterly incomprehensible, the magnitude and rapidity of destruction of beautiful historic neighborhoods is painfully real. As my oldest and dearest friend, who was rendered homeless in a matter of hours on Tuesday, told me today, shock has given way to crashing waves of grief and loss. All of what follows in this episode is not an antidote to that pain. It is an attempt to communicate how we can meet life as it actually is, in all its tenuousness, fragility, impermanence, and unpredictability. We are mere pawns in the play of existence, and the ego will always lie to us and tell us a false story of human mastery and permanence. Lila, Maya, the play of existence always wins, no matter what the self thinks or wants. Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist psychology have a fundamental set of tenets about human existence described beautifully in what is known as the four reflections. These four contemplations turn the mind toward what is most important, and the four reflections are treasured and taught in all three jhanas. The first contemplation reflects on the preciousness of human birth. The tip of the Fingernail Sutta recounts a time when the Buddha picked up a bit of dust with the tip of his fingernail and said to the monks, "Which is greater, this bit of dust on my fingernail or the vast earth?" The monks replied with confidence, "The earth is far greater. That bit of dust is next to nothing. It doesn't even count." The Buddha then agreed and said, "In the same way, few are the beings born as humans. Thus, you should train yourselves to live heedfully." Heedfulness is a combination of zeal, determination, intentionality, dedication, and embodied presencing. These are the qualities most needed after traumatic experiences and so difficult to muster when shock and loss are our constant companions. Knowing that this precious human birth is rare can motivate us to practice even in the midst of life's most difficult and tragic experiences. Every time we recognize suffering, regardless of whether it is generated internally or externally, that moment of recognition is the very ground of non-suffering. Liberation can arise when we contemplate the infinite ways in which life manifests, from the worst of the worst to the best of the best, and of course, everything in between. And weirdly, recognizing the vastness is a doable path to knowing one's true nature after trauma has occurred. This is a key point in Buddhist psychological understanding. Our true nature is the union of clarity and vastness, a container or field in which all perception arises, exists, and passes away. And though that clear light mind may contain all perceptions, the ground of being cannot be tainted or altered by any phenomenal experience, for it is ever present and beyond all perception, yet is the medium by which all perception is known. It is this union of vastness and lucidity that makes human birth so precious. As far as we know, no other species shares that capacity. So when life deals us a deck that suddenly seems insurmountable and unfair, recalling that this moment of massive pain is actually the cause of liberation can catalyze engagement instead of collapse. The second contemplation reflects on impermanence. Conceptually, we know things change, but we do not live the wisdom of that knowing. The Buddha said that even more powerful than many moments of loving kindness is one moment of deeply seeing the impermanent nature of all phenomena. A quote from one of the Buddha's talks in the Majjhima Nikaya is, "Impermanent are compounded things, prone to rise and fall. Having risen, they are destroyed, their passing truest bliss." Try to imagine experiencing everything as continually shifting causes and conditions with no grasping tightly to any of it. It's very hard because we are wired to hold on to pleasure and move away from pain. This is why fixing, holding, fearing, and hoping are the default response for most humans. And that default is the source of all human suffering. Mostly, we're so lost in experience itself that we are neither mindful nor even aware of experience as it is. Sudden, massive destruction is a stark wake-up out of assumptive slumbering. There is a beautiful anecdote about Ajahn Chah, the great Thai forest Buddhist teacher. One day, some people came to him and asked, "How can you be so happy in a world of impermanence, where you cannot protect your loved ones from harm, illness, and death?" Ajahn Chah held up his glass and said, "Someone gave me this glass, and I really like this glass. It holds my water, it glistens in the sunlight. One day the wind may blow this glass off the shelf, or my elbow may knock it from the table. I know this glass is already broken, so I enjoy it immensely." That is what clear knowing of impermanence looks like. The Buddha entreated us to reflect upon death every day we are alive, to help us recognize the impermanence of this precious human life. But it's hard to wake up every morning and remind ourselves that everything we own could be burned away at any time. We don't believe it until it happens. And even then, many people will spend days trying to convince themselves it hasn't really happened. That is one of the many common coping strategies and trauma responses to massive sudden loss. Because knowing death is really hard to do until death shows up. Destruction of one's domicile and neighborhood is a profound death, touching every aspect of daily life, as well as a person's inner life. I imagine many Angelinos are reflecting on how much they took their homes, neighborhoods, and neighbors for granted. Humans can be lax appreciators until they lose what they love, and this alone should stir all of us toward helping these precious beings who have lost so much so suddenly. The third contemplation reflects on karma. All actions have consequences and results. That which most determines the result of an action is the motivation behind it. Even the Buddha once said, "Everything rests upon the tip of motivation." And the Dalai Lama reiterated this point by reminding us that the true value of an action is not measured by its success or failure, but by the motivation behind it. We are so obsessed with success, and our self-worth is often tied to whether we succeed or fail. Yet we cannot control all the forces, all the causes, all conditions that come together to manifest any outcome. To discuss karma, we don't have to consider past lives, because in one day, in this life, think of how many lives you live as you inhabit a succession of identities you need for work, family, friendship. We can think of each day as momentary rebirths of different selves. Impacted Angelinos were probably one person on Monday this week and a whole other person by Wednesday evening. Their motivations, expectations, hopes, desires, and choices have been rebirthed by fire. The Buddha once remarked that only a Buddha mind can fully grasp the complexity of karmic law, the way in which it unfolds, not only within one lifetime, but over countless lives. Jack Kornfield's wise view can be very useful He said, understanding the law of karma is known as the light of the world, because through this understanding, we can take responsibility for our destinies and be more truly guided to greater fulfillment in our lives. How many Angelinos have been forcibly moved by their loss to question and maybe reimagine the goals, wants, needs they once held dear? How many are crippled right now with fear and grief? Both scenarios are normal. Everyone does loss differently. And no matter how loss shows up, acting wisely and compassionately is always the best path to achieve karmic liberation. The fourth and last contemplation reflects on samsara. Samsara is a Sanskrit word that means perpetual journeying or continuous flow. It refers to the endless wandering through cycles of human existence. The Buddha once said, "This samsara is without discoverable beginning." A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering through their lives, hindered by ignorance, craving, and aversion. For such a long time, you have experienced anguish and disaster and swelled the cemetery. So impermanent is life, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to experience revulsion towards all formations, enough to become dispassionate towards them, enough to be liberated from them. Sometimes seeing things as they truly are is revolting. Other times, it is like a jewel shining with incomparable beauty. Sometimes it's actually quite neutral. But no matter what flavor life shows up in, all phenomena are ultimately illusory, impermanent, unsatisfactory, and empty of any inherent self-existence. When I contemplate the massive scale of destruction and loss in Los Angeles, the weight of it wipes away any non-attachment I may profess to have garnered in all my years of Buddhist practice. And that knowing tells me without any doubt that there will be no way for me to truly understand what this has been like for the beings who are in the midst of it. Yet my commitment to awakening motivates me to help alleviate the loss in any small way I can by reminding all of us that as many times as we get lost, it is as many times as we can find ourselves. This is what liberation looks like in the midst of unbearable pain. What can be so real in one moment can also be completely transparent. Can we find a path to being with disaster as it is, rather than grasping at the mind's distorted narratives of disaster, dripping with drama and ego fixation? Disaster itself is enough to cut through delusion and unleash the liberative power of clear seeing. So let's all together, for all of those beings in Los Angeles who are in the midst of loss, let's practice compassion meditation for them. So find yourself in a comfortable position and allow your mind to drop into the experience of your body wherever you are. Feel the weight of your body, and the real weight. You have bones, you have flesh, you have blood. You are a being. It feels really real. It feels really solid. And it is illusory and continually shifting and changing, even though our perception is not that. See if you can allow the mind to recognize any kind of shifting, breath coming and going, blood moving throughout your organism, sounds coming and going around you, movement of life. And now, as best you can, see if you can draw your attention to the part of your being that swells when you're experiencing care and love. And let the attention become seated in that part of your body, in that part of your beingness. The heart of compassion that lives within each of us, no matter how much pain and trauma we have experienced. The heart of compassion is untouchable in its essence and always there. And if you are someone who has experienced this massive loss event in Los Angeles, you can do these phrases for yourself. I will say them as though we're practicing as people who have not experienced it directly, but if you're one of the precious beings who has, please offer this compassion towards yourself as you say the phrases. May I have compassion for the pain and suffering in Los Angeles. If it helps to bring images to mind or even to reflect on Angelinos you may know, feel free to do that as you repeat the phrase, may I have compassion for the pain and suffering in Los Angeles. And compassion doesn't mean fixing. It means open-heartedness in the midst of unimaginable pain and loss. May every impacted Angelino have compassion for their pain and loss. Let your heart swell and see yourself touching all these precious beings. May every impacted Angelino have compassion for their pain and loss, and actively send the open-heartedness, this wish, this compassionate wish, that they somehow find a way to be open-hearted in the midst of destruction. May the pain and suffering of every Angelino be eased. May the pain and suffering of every Angelino be eased. And with your open-heartedness, hold that possibility for them. Not as a demand, not as some bypass of pain, but a reality, the easing of pain and loss is inevitable for everyone at some point. May every impacted Angelino find stability and aliveness in the midst of destruction and loss. Feel the energy, the zeal, the dedication in that compassionate wish. May every impacted Angelino find stability and aliveness in the midst of destruction and loss. This is a clear knowing of human capacity. We have inner strength. We have intelligence. We have creativity. And in all trauma and all traumatic experience, there is always the possibility and inevitability that these qualities at some point will come back online and be available to us. May every impacted Angelino find stability and aliveness in the midst of destruction and loss. Just really let your heart be active and energetic and send this knowing. So let's do the phrases one more time. And And again, if you are one of the impacted Angelinos, please direct these phrases to yourself. And of course, any loved ones, colleagues, friends that you know who are impacted as well. May I have compassion for the pain and suffering in Los Angeles. May every impacted Angelino have compassion for their pain and loss. May the pain and suffering of every impacted Angelino be eased. May every impacted Angelino find stability and aliveness in the midst of destruction and loss. So as we bring our practice to a close, see if you can continue this intent through your day, through your activity today. Should you at any point remember these precious beings in Los Angeles, offer them your compassion, and may the merit of the teaching today, as well as all of our practice, be dedicated to the liberation from suffering of all beings everywhere.